So, Angela, I've been thinking about that recent Harvard Business Review piece, the one on how AI is quietly dismantling consulting's old pyramid model. For decades, that structure defined the business, armies of junior consultants grinding through data and cranking out slides, while a small circle of partners provided the authority and legitimacy. It worked because it was hierarchical, but now that foundation is eroding. Automation has taken over the entry-level work. The research, the analysis, the storytelling, hollowing out the base of the pyramid.
It really is, Simon. And honestly, design isn't insulated either. Remember when design thinking was treated almost like a sacred discipline? This protected space for empathy, creativity, and human-centered insight? For so many years, it was what set design apart from everything else in business. But now, with generative AI and those endless pre-built UX flows, the magic feels thinner, less exclusive. What used to be the craft of discovery is becoming a menu of presets, and there's something cultural in that shift. Design used to have this aura of human touch, the intuition, the workshop energy, the shared whiteboard moments that made meaning feel co-created. Now, a lot of that has been abstracted into automated templates. You can prompt an AI to prototype a service ecosystem or generate 5 personas in seconds. It's efficient, but it's also disembodied. In the process, empathy, which was once the moral core of design, risks becoming a simulation. The empathy is still there, but mediated by data and probabilities instead of lived experience. That's the real loss of exclusivity. It's not that everyone can design now, it's that design no longer requires the human friction that used to give it authenticity.
Absolutely. It's not just about making things faster, is it? It's that AI made the work transparent. Suddenly everyone can see behind the curtain the research, the frameworks, the design flows, all the things that used to be invisible and therefore valuable. The craft that once signaled expertise now looks procedural, almost mechanical, and that's the real disruption. When clients can literally watch a language model build a strategy outline or see a design tool generate 10 brand systems in real time, the aura of expertise evaporates. The authority of consulting and design used to rest on opacity, on the sense that only a select few could decode complexity. AI stripped that mystique away. The irony, of course, is that transparency should build trust, but here it does the opposite. Once you make the process transparent, you reveal just how much of it can be replicated. And when replication is cheap, legitimacy becomes fragile. These professions spent decades constructing rituals of expertise, the deck, the workshop, the insight reveal. And AI has turned those rituals into commodities.
Exactly, and those numbers don't lie either. Deloitte UK saw consulting revenue drop by 10%, while partner pay actually went up. That's such a clear signal of strain. The economics are separating from the value being created. And then you've got Accenture cutting over 11,000 roles as part of its AI restructuring. The official story was efficiency and transformation, but internally it's about rebuilding the firm around automation. Even the design world isn't immune. IDEO, once the symbol of creative consulting, has pulled back from project delivery altogether. Now it's mostly helping clients build their own in-house design capabilities. Fjord, which was absorbed into Accenture Song, has taken the same route, moving from making to teaching, from artifacts to ecosystems. The sands are shifting everywhere. What used to be stable, almost ritualistic models of practice, whether consulting frameworks or design methodologies, are being rewritten in real time. And you can feel it in the air. People inside these firms are uneasy because they sense that the old sources of legitimacy no longer hold. The hierarchy still exists on paper, but culturally it's dissolving.
It's legitimacy drift, plain and simple. Once you expose how expertise is actually built, or worse, automated, the old signifiers stop working. The credentials, the titles, the carefully staged rituals of analysis or creativity, they lose their weight. What used to feel rare now feels reproducible, and what's reproducible rarely commands trust. And you're right, it's not just about efficiency. This is something much deeper, a cultural unraveling. These industries were built on the assumption that expertise carried both mystery and authority. But when AI demystifies the process, what's left is a kind of existential transparency. Everyone can see the scaffolding, but the structure of belief, the thing that made expertise meaningful, starts to collapse. It's like the floor hasn't fallen out all at once, but it's slowly giving way. The trust that once held these hierarchies together is leaking through the cracks.
Couldn't agree more. It's almost like we have to start mapping legitimacy itself as a cultural phenomenon if we're going to get anywhere near understanding how deep this crisis goes. Because legitimacy isn't just a business asset, it's a belief system. It's how people decide who to trust, whose judgment counts, and what kinds of knowledge feel credible. And when that belief system fractures, it's not only markets that shift, it's identities. The consultant who once saw themselves as a translator of complexity now feels replaceable. The designer who thought of creativity as intuition now competes with predictive tools. Mapping legitimacy means tracing how those identities evolve as culture, technology, and trust keep reorganizing around each other.
You know, for years consulting was built on that pyramid, a stack of juniors grinding through the research while partners sat at the top, adding the polish and authority. It wasn't just structure, it was a belief system. That expertise was something you earned by climbing. But automation has blown that apart. Why hire dozens of analysts when algorithms can pull insights, clean data, and generate slides in seconds? The economics don't add up anymore. And beyond that, the apprenticeship model, the way people actually learned the craft, is breaking down. The pyramid worked because it taught you how to think. Once machines do the thinking, that whole cultural engine for building expertise starts to disappear.
Right, and it's the same story in design. Remember the workshop economy? The big idea was that creativity came from gathering people in a room, sticky notes everywhere, whiteboards full of ideas, that ritual of human insight. But now, when a template or an AI tool can prototype in minutes the same process a whole team used to spend days exploring, the mystique fades as credibility that used to come from its process, the sense that the method itself revealed truth. But if the method is automated, what's left is just output, and output alone doesn't build trust.
So consulting's identity crisis is all about efficiency. We used to prove value through sheer effort. But design's crisis is about authorship, right? About who actually gets credit when creativity itself becomes automated.
Exactly. Who even gets to decide what counts as creativity or good judgment once AI enters the room? Figma's CEO, Dylan Field, put it well when he said AI should lower the floor and raise the ceiling. That sounds empowering, but it also flattens the whole ladder of expertise. Everyone starts closer to the top, but the climb, the craft, disappears. And it's not just design. Microsoft's consulting arm has frozen hiring and is pouring investment into AI platforms instead of people. That says everything. The performance of expertise, the meetings, the slide decks, the rituals, is losing ground to clients who just want the insight itself. The process no longer sells, only the outcome does.
Exactly. Once clients realized they could get what they needed without all the theater of authority, the decks, the workshops, the carefully staged reveals, the performance stopped meaning anything. The ritual lost its power. And yeah, it's the same song in both fields, just different verses.
Indeed, the symbolic authority, that old myth of the expert, just doesn't land the same way anymore. AI has flattened everything. The aura that once surrounded expertise, that sense of distance and mystery, it's kind of gone. What's left is a very different kind of credibility, one built less on performance and more on transparency. But no one's quite figured out how to make that feel trustworthy yet.
Let's try to unpack who's actually driving and blocking all this change. In consulting, you've got senior partners still clinging to their legacy rituals, engagement architects trying to keep the client's story coherent, AI facilitators weaving technology into the process, and now these ethics leads brought in to keep the whole thing honest, or at least accountable.
And it's the same story on the design side. You've got creative directors defending the craft, systems designers building new frameworks, and AI integrators pushing hard for the latest tools. Then there are the foresight strategists trying to anticipate where culture's heading, the big picture thinkers. But it all creates this web of tension. You've got traditionalists holding the line, AI evangelists itching to break it, skeptical veterans who don't quite buy in, and the hidden resistors, the ones who nod in meetings but quietly slow everything down.
And then there's the ripple effect beyond the firms themselves. You've got the residual players, procurement offices, business schools still clinging to old models, the dominant ones, the big consultancies and design conglomerates, holding their ground at least for now. Then come the upstarts, AI-native boutiques, creative labs, and those hybrid firms that live somewhere between consulting and design. And finally, the real disruptors, open-source AI collectives, activist ethicists, even decentralized design swarms rewriting the rules in real time. It's a landscape that gets messier, faster, and more interesting every month.
Exactly. Take Accenture Song, they're trying to fuse strategy, design, and AI into a single hybrid model. It's ambitious, but it shows what's really happening underneath. We're watching an identity migration. The experts who once lived inside big firms are now operating as cultural interpreters, moving through networks, forming alliances, dissolving boundaries as they go. Expertise isn't institutional anymore, it's nomadic.
This is where it gets tricky, affordances and cognitive burden. Affordances are all those new levers the landscape creates, new tools, new opportunities, new ways to work. But with them comes the weight, the mental load of having too many choices, moving too fast. Organizations, and honestly individuals too, are starting to buckle under the complexity. These are industries that used to sell certainty, clarity, structure, a way forward. Now they're delivering more complexity than ever.
Exactly. Look at BCG. Nearly 90% of their staff use AI every day now. But the challenge isn't access, it's interpretation. There's just this relentless flood of algorithmic choices. It's exhausting. One designer I spoke to put it perfectly. AI doesn't make you more creative. It just floods you with options. And that's really what's shifted. Creativity, or even strategy, isn't about generating ideas anymore. It's about filtering them, deciding which signals matter, which outputs actually carry meaning. The work has become less about invention and more about discernment.
There's a cruel paradox here, isn't there? The very industries people turn to for clarity have become engines of anxiety. The rituals that once managed uncertainty have collapsed, but the uncertainty itself hasn't gone anywhere. So now the real work, the real cost, is managing that cognitive strain. That's the emotional price of staying legitimate in this post-expertise world.
Completely. Those rituals used to calm everyone, clients, teams, even the people doing the work. Now we're improvising, constantly searching for new ones, and rarely finding anything that sticks. The emotional toll is enormous. even though on paper the work supposedly got easier. It's the strange irony of automation, less friction but more fatigue.
Let's imagine a few futures. Say it's 2035. Maybe we're in what you could call a foresight renaissance. Smaller, more adaptive firms where people focus on meaning, ethics, and context, while AI handles the speed and scale. You can already see hints of it. EY and Accenture are both pivoting toward foresight and sense-making as core capabilities. EY's leadership even said recently they expect to double productivity with AI without layoffs. That's the model. Humans as the ethical compass, AI as the amplifier.
And then we get to 2040. By now, everything's fragmented: freelancers, boutique AI labs, in-house client teams, maybe a few survivors from the Big Four or the old design giants. Clients start curating their own hybrid squads. Diversity skyrockets, but cohesion, not so much. Trust turns transactional, piecemeal. You get variety, sure, but you risk losing the glue that binds expertise to real outcomes.
By 2050, it could all collapse. Algorithmic consultancies, automated design engines, but no shared standards, no real trust. When AI misfires in architecture, policy, or finance, the failures ripple everywhere. The backlash wipes out whatever's left of professional judgment. At that point, nostalgia for old-school human analysis might be all anyone has left. The loss isn't just technical, it's cultural. Deliberation gives way to automation, and trust quietly disappears.
Exactly. When you take away real deliberation, the reflection, the dialogue, the industry doesn't just shrink, it loses its soul. And if we don't catch up culturally, the damage might not just be financial or structural. It could be irreversible.
So, after all the diagnosis, here's where the path forward really begins. Cultural mapping. It's not about chasing the next piece of tech. It's about tracking how meaning and legitimacy move in real time. Culture isn't the soft stuff on top. It's the infrastructure that holds everything else together.
Absolutely. Culture mapping isn't about prediction. It's about seeing how new values, language, and behaviors take root, and how different parts of a system adapt or resist. If consulting and design want to rebuild legitimacy, they have to treat culture as something living and continuous, not as decorative fluff tacked onto the business.
Right, so let's break down the path forward. 7 recommendations, all built on that foresight model. First, adopt intelligence consulting and design models, smaller, adaptive teams that blend AI with human interpretation. IDEO's shift into systems design and long-term cultural foresight is a good example, less about producing deliverables, more about helping organizations make sense of what's coming next.
Second, embed ethics directly into the workflow, not as a compliance box to tick at the end. Every decision, every deliverable should surface its social and cultural impact. Accenture's responsible AI framework gives us an example of that in practice. It builds ethical reflection right into how projects are designed and delivered.
Third, reinvent the talent pipelines. That means crossing the old boundaries between business and design schools, blending strategy, data, design, and ethics into a shared discipline. Build hybrid teams that speak a common, future-facing language. Less hierarchy, more apprenticeship. Learning by collaboration, not competition.
Fourth, shift compensation from hours to outcomes. Value should be measured by impact, cultural, behavioral, and yes, financial too. Some firms are already experimenting with this, tying pricing to behavioral change instead of deliverables. It sends a clear signal about what actually matters, results that shift how people think and act, not just what gets produced.
Fifth, embrace ecosystem partnerships. Drop the old walled garden mentality. Work with AI boutiques, client labs, and open collectives instead of competing with them. Fjord's evolution inside Accenture Song is one example. moving from a closed studio model to a co-creation platform. It's about expanding reach without losing meaning.
Sixth, rebuild trust as a core deliverable. Make it explicit and measurable. Trust should be part of every project's outcome, right alongside the metrics. Transparency, interpretability, accountability, those are the new currencies of value.
And finally, cultural analysis has to become a continuous practice, a living operating system for organizations. That means ongoing scenario planning, cultural signal mapping, and AI-assisted insight detection. It's not about chasing prediction. It's about cultivating awareness, staying human, staying alert, and catching cultural drift before it turns into a crisis.
For me, the real lesson isn't about saving the old professions. It's about preserving our capacity for shared interpretation. That's the heart of culture itself. When consulting and design put collective meaning-making at the center again, they don't just stay relevant, they regain legitimacy.
That's it. If these industries stop pretending to have all the answers and start acting like labs for inquiry, maybe that's how we find our way back to trust. We began with a collapse of authority, but maybe we end with a chance to renew meaning instead. Before we wrap, can I share a quick story? A few months ago, I was consulting for a very traditional firm trying to embed AI. Publicly, the senior team was all in, nodding along at town halls, talking about transformation. But behind closed doors, the skepticism was thick in the air. It wasn't open rebellion, it was quieter than that. Half the resistance was almost unconscious. You could feel the fear, not just of job loss, but of losing authority. There were whispers, little jokes about algorithms as junior partners. It sounds harmless, but that's how legitimacy really fades. Not through a single moment of crisis, but in the small, private acts of disbelief that come long before the org chart catches up.
Definitely. I spoke with a few young designers at a boutique agency in New York, and their anxiety wasn't really about losing jobs. It was about losing purpose. They said they felt valued mostly as human filters for AI-generated concepts instead of actual creators. One designer told me she spent more time second-guessing machine outputs than inventing her own ideas. That constant mental sorting, that quiet self-doubt. It's a different kind of burnout. It's not physical exhaustion, it's existential.
Yeah, these stories aren't outliers. They're symptoms of the bigger structural and cultural burdens we've been talking about. It all connects: the cognitive strain, the emotional fatigue, the legitimacy drift, the longing for real cultural redesign. If anything, these lived experiences remind us that the solution isn't technical or managerial, it's deeply, stubbornly cultural.
Completely. And honestly, it gives me a bit of hope. If the people on the ground can already see these burdens for what they are, maybe the industries can too, and start reinventing themselves, not just to survive, but to mean something again.
I think that's a good note to end on, or maybe just to pause on, since we'll definitely be coming back to these threads in future episodes.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure, Simon. And thanks to everyone listening. More to come soon.